Well, good morning, everyone. As has been mentioned, today is Senior Sunday, and so what that means is immediately after this service, here in just a little bit, we're going to have our presentation for the seniors. So after the closing prayer here in just a little while, please have a seat. We're going to get straight into our presentation. We're going to hand out the Bibles and watch the slideshow and all that jazz. And then after that, you'll all be dismissed to go home, have lunch, take a nap, binge watch Netflix, whatever it is that you like to do on a Sunday afternoon. But make plans to come back up here at 6 o'clock today and go to the new fellowship hall because the seniors will have their tables set up for you to come view. And so you can come if you want to bring a card or a gift. I will ask the seniors to bring the Bibles that we're going to give them and set them out on their tables if you still want to write a note. There'll be cake and punch, if nothing else. So please come and encourage our graduates and congratulate them on their accomplishment between 6 and 7 o'clock tonight, New Fellowship Hall. What I want to talk about this morning, though, is a really familiar story about three men named Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay, you know this story? It's Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and the fiery furnace. Thank you. Yes, see, real famous story found in Daniel. Go ahead and get out your Bibles and turn to Daniel chapter 1. We're going to spend our morning in these first three chapters. And to set the stage for the book of Daniel, as was read just a little while ago, here's what's happening. Babylon has just conquered Judah. And so as any great nation would want to do, any powerful nation that's just conquered, they want to maintain control over Judah. Okay, and so kind of one way to do that is to really assert dominance and really kind of make a show of force over the conquered. So we're going to start this morning in Daniel chapter 1, starting in verse 3. Then the king of Babylon commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, used without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace. So, what are we doing here? What's a good way to really show that we're all powerful, we can do whatever we want, we can take whatever we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. So what are we going to do? We're going to take your kids. Just imagine that. Somebody coming in and saying, I'm so strong I can take your kids, there's nothing you can do about it. Kind of like the Hunger Games, if you've ever read those books or seen the movies, how the capital has defeated the districts, and so each year to show them just how powerful the capital is, how weak the districts are, each year we're going to take some of your kids, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, unlike the Hunger Games here, they're not taking the kids to execute them or to enslave them. Babylon has a different strategy. They're thinking long-term here. Okay, how can we keep Judah suppressed forever, all right, so for as long as possible? So I imagine that, there in the palace, they had a board meeting, and they presented this question, how can we think long-term? And somebody's like, hey, I got an idea. What if we, okay, now follow me on this, what if we turn Judah into Babylon? Okay? Not a bad idea. How do we do this? Okay, so the kids that we're taking, let's not go out and find the riffraff and the orphans that are starving and malnourished and dirty. Let's grab the royal kids. Let's grab the noble kids. These kids probably early teens at this time. We're going to go find the future leaders of Israel, and we're going to pull them out of Israel, and we're going to plop them down right here in the middle of Babylon. We're going to surround them with our culture and our influence, and it even says, finishing out verse 4 there, and teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were like the wise men of the Babylonian court. They were the astrologers, the diviners, the ones that the king would come in and say, hey, I woke up this morning, my toenail hurts. What does that mean? And they'd throw knuckle bones on the ground and be like, oh, king, it means you're going to step on the throats of your enemies. And he'd be like you're thinking, okay? Those were the wise men. Those were the Chaldeans. And so we're going to bring these Israelites, these future leaders of Israel, we're going to bring them to Babylon. We're going to surround them with our culture. We're going to teach them our literature, teach them our ways, and as they grow, we're going to mold their minds. And then, when Israel is looking to their leaders, guess who we got in place? Sleeper agents for Babylon. and then it'll have the trickle-down effect. So boom, easy recipe for converting a whole nation. We're going to convert, we're going to influence the head. So that's the thing there. Verse 6, among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now I want you to pay attention to these four names here. Daniel, Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah. These names, they have significance. They show connection, just like our names today still show connection. You know, you walk up to somebody you meet and you say, what's your name? My name's John Plymouth. And you're like, oh, hey, are you related to the Plymouths a couple towns over? And you're like, yeah, that's my second uncle. So all of a sudden you're like, yeah, okay, I know them. And so I know you. I at least know about you. I know the Plymouths. They're a really good family. So you come from good stock, and all of a sudden you know some of the connection already. Because those names, they show the connection. Well, these names, Israelite names that end in L, like Daniel or Mishael, names that end in Yah, like Hananiah, Azariah, those names show connection to God. Because El comes from Elohim, which means the God. Yah comes from Yahweh, the name of the God. So these names, they show direct connection to the Israelite faith and to the Israelite God. So we're going to pull these kids from Israel and we're going to put them right here in the middle of Babylon. What's the first thing we need to do? We need to cut all their ties to their past. So verse 7, and the chief of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. So we're going to bring these boys from Israel. We're going to put them in Babylon. We're going to give them new clothes. We're going to give them a new place to live. We're going to give them new books to read. We're going to give them new names. We're even going to give them new food. And they're like, whoa, we're Israelites. We can't just eat anything. But the chief of the eunuchs is like, hey, you need to eat this food, okay? You can't follow your weird God diet, and I can't have you looking weak and malnourished because you're worshiping this God. You need to eat these foods from the king's table so that you're robust and healthy looking like the other Babylonian boys. We have this image that you need to fit. So you need to do our things. You need to think like us. You need to dress like us. You need to eat like us so that you can be as much like us as possible. So fast forward a couple of years. For us, that's fast forward one chapter in chapter 2. So the king, Nebuchadnezzar, he has this dream about the statue with the different parts. And it really bugs him. He wants to know what it means. Now, our boys here, they are like assistant wise men. They're still in the training program. So they're not at the palace when the king comes and says, wise men of the palace, what does this mean? And they can't answer his question. So the king is like, fine, if you can't answer my question, then kill them all. And that includes the assistants. So the captain of the guard goes to Daniel's house and he's like, hey, Daniel, sorry, but I have to kill you. And Daniel kind of figures out what's going on. And he says, okay, make an appointment for me to see the king because I think my God can do this for him. So an appointment is set for the next day. But, and by the way, we know that, he talks to Daniel, but his roommates are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They're kind of all in this together. Imagine what that message sends to you from the king, okay? That message that says, if you can't do what I want you to do, if you can't fit this image that I have set for you, then you're expendable, okay? I'll cut you out. I'll replace you with another guy. Your job is to do what I want you to do. Let me make that crystal clear to you by stabbing you in the face if I have to, all right? Imagine kind of what that does to your mentality. My only position in life, my only reason for being here is to do whatever the king wants me to do. Let's fast forward another 15 to 18 years. Okay, the boys have done a really good job. For us, we fast forward one more chapter to chapter 3, by the way. So the boys have done a really good job. They are promoted to overseers over all the other wise men. And the king gets a a wild hair, a silly guy, and builds a 90-foot tall statue and covers it with gold. For reference, I believe the peak of this ceiling is probably about 30 feet from the ground. So if the statue was a man, that would be about the top of his knee. Okay, just for reference, that's aside from the point. He commands everyone to worship this statue. Guess who doesn't? Yeah, our boys. They don't. And so the underling wise men, they see an opportunity here, and they go and rat them out to the king. Okay, now, chapter 3, verse 8. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. Do you think that these Chaldeans cared anything about that statue? Do you think that they were concerned that it's not getting the full amount of worship that it deserves? No, they didn't care anything about that stupid statue. What they saw was a corporate ladder, and if they can clear off this rung, then they can take a step up. Good thing that don't happen anymore. Okay? So here's what's happening is the king now calls in Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he's like, hey, I've heard some birds a-chirping, and they're telling me that you're not worshiping the statue. Did you not see it? Okay, worshiping the statue is the new thing. Now, I like you guys, I really do, and so here's the deal I'm going to make with you. You just bow down and worship it, and we'll forget this whole ugly incident ever happened. But if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I am the king of this huge, powerful nation of Babylon. I represent all the culture, all the society, all the influence wrapped into one person. If you don't worship my idols, I will throw you into a fire, and there is no God more powerful than me. So we've got these boys who are young men at this point, who are surrounded by this culture that is trying to influence them and change them to fit this desired image that a true Babylonian should be. My question is ancient Babylon really that much different than our modern society? Sure, we may not have a giant statue that we're commanded to bow down and worship, there may not be actual idols laying all around, people bowing down to actual idols, but idol worship is still rampant in our society. People worship money, and they worship themselves, and they worship social media, and they worship celebrities, and they worship politicians, and they worship pleasure. And the list goes on and on. They worship anything that you put above God becomes an idol, and we see this all around. So imagine putting yourself in Hananiah's sandals, and you're on any street in Babylon. You look to the left, and you look straight ahead and to the right, and over here you see somebody bowing down to a golden cow, and you look down that street, and you see the priests of some false god parading by, and you look over here, and there's smoke rising from a sacrifice being made to something. Okay, it surrounded those people in Babylon. And then here today, we look on TV and we look on our phones and we look at movies and news and advertisements and billboards and commercials. And everywhere we look, there's society saying, here is the ideal standard to shoot for, to pursue wealth and material possessions, and a body image, and professional success, and fornication, and being accepting and tolerant of everybody, regardless of their life choices. There's, our forms of idol worship in our society may not be as obvious as seeing people actually bowing down to chunks of metal. Ours sometimes tend to be a little more subtle. I love watching movies. It's one of my favorite pastimes. And I really have, the past 12, 15 years, I've loved watching the Marvel movies. Of course, growing up, I was always a Spider-Man fan. But, when the Iron Man movies started coming out and Avengers, it's been really cool. But when I watch these movies, I see, the protagonist, the hero, the main guy. What's he look like? He's He's tall, and he's muscular and chiseled and handsome, and he's strong, and if there's a problem, he just punches somebody through a wall and problem solved, and he's always in control, and he's surrounded by these girls in tight clothing, and there's that voice in the back of my head that says, oh man, don't you want to be like him? I'm like, oh man, I'd love to look like Captain America, and I'd love to be as rich and as smart as Tony Stark. That would just be awesome. And that voice is like, yeah, you should want to be like these people. They're the heroes. They're the good guys. But for all of their goodness, they're not disciples of Christ. Okay, and I'm not trying to knock on just those movies. Okay, I love Marvel movies. I'm going to keep watching them. And it's not just the Marvel movies. It's everywhere. Whenever we look left, right, and center, we see idol worship of some form going on. It's society saying, you don't have to worship God. We have all these other idols here that you can worship and get what you want. If you want to worship wealth, by golly, we'll give it to you. If you want to worship a certain physical physique, you can have it. If you want to worship success, it's all yours. You don't have to worship God. You can worship these other idols. You can have everything you want, and you can be happy. But the problem is that these idols eventually will fail you. It's only God that never will fail. And I believe that that's what gave Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah the strength to look at that big golden idol and to look at that fire and then look straight at the king and give their famous response here in verse 16 of chapter 3. They said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, if you really are going to throw us in the fire, our God whom we serve is able to serve us is able to save us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand. But if not, even if he chooses not to, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods. We will not worship the golden image that you have set up. One of the greatest pronouncements of faith in history. To see the consequence, but yet say, no, I'm still choosing God. And I kind of have to wonder, where does that great, faith no matter what, where does that come from? Did, in that moment when they're standing in front of the crackling fire, or rather standing before the king, did God pour out his Holy Spirit on them and fill them with spiritual strength so that Nebuchadnezzar can say conform or die, and they say, you know what, no, I choose this? Did they just kind of get that all of a sudden? Suppose that you took somebody from Babylon, let's say that Jim Bob is a good traditional Babylonian name, and you pull Jim Bob in off the street and you say, Jim Bob, worship that statue or burn in the fire. Do you think that he would all of a sudden be like, he was born and raised in Babylon. You think he'd just all of a sudden kind of have this overwhelming sense of, I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I'm getting this feeling that the answer is no. I'm going to stick to my guns with God. No, he wouldn't do that. He'd be on his knees worshiping that statue before you even finished your sentence. That faith does not just appear any more than tomorrow morning. I'm not going to wake up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, I keep crossing my fingers every night, and it hadn't happened yet. Mandy doesn't want me too buff, though, so that's all right. But that strength, that strength of faith has to be built just like a well-toned body does. So where did they get that? Well, if we look back 15 to 18 years, for us that's back one chapter in chapter 2. So Daniel gets the news that they have to appease the king. They have to come up with something to appease the king, or it's bad news for them. So in verse 17 of chapter 2, then Daniel went into his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Now, I don't think that it went down like this. I don't think that Daniel went in and said, okay, huddle up, everybody. We've got to come up with something to make the king happy, all right? So let's all pray to God. But I also know that God sometimes takes his dear sweet time answering prayers. So I saw Jim Bob outside worshiping that cow, and he's really successful. I mean, he makes a lot of money. He's got a lot of wives. He's successful worshiping that golden cow. So after we get done praying to God, let's all go outside and pray to the cow. And then we'll just make the circuit around town. We'll pray to Asherah and Molech and Baal and whatever else we can find. We're just going to take the question, we're going to toss it up in the air. Whatever God can answer it and whenever can answer it and drop it down, that's what we're going to go with. We need to cultivate multiple options here. We need to diversify the portfolio. And what if the gods don't answer us? We're smart people. We're the smartest kids of Israel. Let's just come up with something. The king's stupid. We can just tell him, King, it means you're going to live forever. And he'll just be like, promotion. Okay, that's because that's what the king does. And then if all else fails, let's just plan an escape route. You think that they spent all that time coming up with options? I don't. I think that they spent that night on their knees with their faces pressed to the floor, praying to God and worshiping Him and Him only. It wasn't as an immediate consequence as the fire, but they saw something coming and they resisted. They had plenty of opportunity to find other solutions. But they resisted all other options and put all their eggs in God's basket. And you say, well, that's great. That kind of helps build up faith so that you can actually stand in front of a fire and still say, it's my God or nothing. But where did they get the faith in this moment to resist all other options? How do you build your faith up to that? Well, if we go back another couple of years, for us that's back one chapter to chapter 1. So here the boys have been brought from Israel to Babylon, and they're surrounded with all this influence, and they've got new clothes, and they've got a new house, and new books, and new food. And whoa, the food? No, okay? Our God says no to the food. So we're drawing a line in the sand. I'll wear the clothes. I'll live in the house. I'll read the books. But my God said no to this food. And you might think, well, by golly, that's a little thing. It's not like they're saying, it's not like they're worshiping an idol. It's not like they're bowing down to some image somewhere. It's just bacon is all it is. If you were to put yourself in Hananiah's sandals again, you could rationalize this situation because we're professional rationalizers. You could be like, you know what? I just got ripped from my home and I had to travel 400 miles on a camel that you can't imagine how it smells. And then now I've been forced to wear these new weird clothes and I'm learning an entirely new language and I'm reading these books that I don't like. And now they're just putting down some food in front of me. I've earned this little bit, okay? It's not like I'm worshiping this or that. It's just some food. Even people on a diet get a cheat day every now and then. So it's not that big a deal. But for Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they were given those new names, those Babylonian names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But in their minds, I don't think that they ever took on those names. They kept their Israelite names because their connection to God was more important than their connection to society. And so when society says, here's the food you eat, and God says, you better not, they said, I choose God over society. The little things, it's the little things that build strength for the bigger things. So how do we avoid being tainted, as James chapter 1 says, avoid being stained by the world? How do we avoid that influence? It's in the little things. It may seem like going to church every time the doors are open, that may seem like a little thing. Reading your Bible every day may be a little thing. Maybe praying without ceasing, serving others, avoiding areas that you know you're going to be tempted in. Those may seem like little things. You may say, so I didn't go to church all the time. It's not like I'm bowing down to some idol. Okay, so I don't read my Bible every day. It's not like I'm a devil worshiper. But how you practice is how you play. And if your practice is to give in on the little things, what's that going to mean when the bigger, harder things come? Now, my prayer for all of you, what I want to pray, what kind of comes, the urging from my soul, is to pray, God, please let nothing hard ever happen to the people in this room. Let them have easy, comfortable lives forever. that's just my empathetic side. I want things to be easy and comfortable for people. But I know that we are precious to God just like gold is precious to us. And the Bible uses the analogy of God as a goldsmith who occasionally puts gold in the fire to refine it and to purify it and burn out the impurities. And so I know that if God loves you, occasionally He's going to allow you to withstand the fire to refine you. The question is, what are we doing now in the little things to prepare to stand in front of that fire and hear the voices all around us saying, hey, we've got idols over here. You don't have to go through the fire. You can get what you want from an idol over here. What are we doing with the little things now to prepare to stand in front of that fire and have the faith of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah to say, my God can save me from these hard times. But even if He doesn't, I will not serve your gods. I will not worship those idols. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they did not make that decision when they were standing in front of the fire. They made that decision when they sat down at the dinner table. And we cannot wait until we're smelling the smoke to decide to be committed to God. As graduates, what you guys, there are 5 people in this room today that are the graduates. What you guys have a lot of right now is options. Where to go, what to do, what to study, where to work, who to hang out with. You're going to have lots and lots of options. Just remember that your connection to God is more important than your connection to your society. Don't wait to make that commitment in your walk with God till it's too late. You need to make the commitment now that the little things are the big things. Now, the good news, okay, I'm not up here to be all grim and rough on you. I'm not to say, welcome to the world, kids. There's fires everywhere. Hope you like barbecue, because it's not, it's actually good news this morning. How many people were thrown into the fire? 3. How many people were in the fire? 4. That's right. Our God is perfectly willing to meet you in the fire. Our God will go into the fire ahead of you to see you through it. Today may be graduation Sunday, but today could also be your birthday. It could be the day that you say, I'm ready to face the fires because I know that God will be with me. Today could be the day, maybe you've already made that commitment, but the idols of this world have been too tempting and you need help getting away from them. If you need the prayers of this church, we want to help you. If you want to talk to one of the shepherds, they want to listen to you. If you're ready this morning to make that commitment and say, I will not serve those other gods, I will not worship those idols, then won't you come as we stand and sing?